Hello and welcome to a demo of my Fantasy World personality quiz app. I wrote this in Swift, so you'll see I've got a storyboard layout here for all of the different pages. I'll get into that in a bit. Basically, my motivation behind this project was I wanted to create a quizzing system that was a little more in-depth and complex than what you might often see online. There are these, you may or may not know about these, but there are like these cheesy websites that allow you to take a quiz that align you with any sort of fandom you might be interested in. A common one is, for example, take this quiz to learn which Hogwarts house you align with, and you go through maybe 10 questions and end up with Gryffindor or Ravenclaw or whatever you end up with. And the way these work is pretty simple. Basically, you have a set of integers, and every time you answer a question, an integer for whatever alignment you answered the question for increments by however many points. And then at the end of the quiz, whichever integer is the highest is the alignment that you receive. I think that there's room here for improvement, and so this is my attempt at that. What I did was I created a fantasy world, and this ended up being quite a writing project as well as a programming project because I got pretty invested in it. Uh, but basically, I'll go ahead and show you what my quizzing system looks like. On this page here, I've got sort of a stat breakdown. You can see these are the names of all the species that you can align with. They're maybe a bit more on the chaotic side, but I had fun coming up with what looked like a completely unordinary naming system. So let's look, for example, at the Drubinst people. For any stat, the highest point you can get is 50. And what I have here is a system where you have a main attribute, so intellect, spirit, any of the ones in blue, followed by sub-attributes. So for intellect, your stats are distributed between creativity, wisdom, and analysis. And so for the Drubinst people, for example, you have a very high ratio of wisdom and analytical prowess versus your creativity. And so this is what it looks like as percentages, and this is what it looks like as a stat distribution. The interesting thing here is the percentages are actually a completely different way to measure your alignment versus the points. So let's say, for example, you align with the Skloonst people, but you only chose an intellect of 21, which is half. And the way you distribute that is 8, 5, and 8. Well, that ratio is exactly the same, right? And that matters because it's a relationship between these three sub-attributes, and that tells you something. So the way that I decided to do this was the ratios between count as half of your alignment, and the stats that you have count as the other half. So based on stats, you might not align with the Skloonst people very much, but if your ratios are exactly the same, that will show. Okay, so that's kind of a broad understanding. One thing to note is my system is very easy to add other races to, or other species, whatever you want to call them, if you want, because all you need to do is create a stat breakdown like you see for all these other ones, and calculate the ratios, calculate the points that you allot, and you already have your next species that you can align to. So this system works on a what am I trying to say? This can be expanded is basically the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so let's go over the app workflow. You start out at the main menu, and then this gives you some broad information about what the app is going to app experience is going to be. We'll go through it. Quiz section A is next. In quiz section A, you answer questions that basically determine the ratios of your sub attributes, and we'll go through all of this in more detail as we open the app and actually take the quiz. Quiz section B basically tells you to align or allot points to your main attributes. So remember, the main attributes are intellect, spirit, and sociability. Physicality is kind of just a fun one I wanted to add, but it's not really a main part of the quiz. You can see I only weighted it as 10% of what your alignment will actually be. And then you go to a results page. This lets you choose between any alignments that happen to be in the top 10% of your top alignment. So for example, if you align with one species at 80% and another with at 75 and another at 72, those three options will show up because they were within 10% of each other. But if you align with one species at 80% and another species at 68%, because it's higher than 10% away, you will only have the option of the first species. And then finally, you have like an information page about the alignment that you chose, and it gives you some fun reading to do on top. Okay, lastly, there's this page I made that just is sort of a versatile information page. You'll see this get used a couple of times, and I'll point it out when we do. Let's take the quiz. So here's the home page that I was talking about, that main menu. I'm going to scroll through this quickly because you can pause and read if you find yourself interested. And then I'll go in here. You can see these are all of the different options. And if I want to go in and click on one of these, you'll see I actually wrote quite a bit for each one. Again, this became a writing project as much as it did a programming project, but I had fun with it. I thought it would be interesting to really create a strong sense of a world. So I'll just go ahead and scroll through all of these for anyone who happens to be interested. And then we'll move on to taking the quiz, which will also probably involve a decent amount of scrolling as well. So bear with me. I will make sure on the video to include timestamps so that anyone who's just more interested in the process and the programming can jump through to any point that they want easily. But for those interested in the reading, let's go through it. Hopefully the sense of humor in these questions is enjoyed. I had a lot of fun writing these questions. Some of them are a little more absurd than others, as you'll see. And you'll see some of these questions have 6 questions or 6 answers, and some have 3. And some of the ones with 6 answers are combination answers. And so what happens here is you have a 50-50 of whatever A and B, for example, would give you. You have a 50-50 between those of what points are added to you. And after we finish the quiz, maybe I'll go in and show you how each of these questions can contribute to your sub-attribute ratios. All right, halfway through. And you can see at the top here, if I wanted to, I could just randomize and get to the next section very quickly. I'm choosing to show my writing just in case anyone happens to find themselves interested, but yeah. Let's see, I'll just choose randomly here. Almost done. I'll just go ahead and answer quickly here. Sure. Sure. 3 more. Last one, the pet question. Who will you choose as your companion? I love Canuck Flock. Canuck Flock is the one I always go with. All right, done with section 1. So what this section has done is it's given us a set of weighted questions. Each one adds to our sub-attribute potential. And then once we're done with the quiz, all of those points are added up and divided over their totals, and it gives us a set of ratios. So now we have our sub-attribute ratios. It's time to allocate our main attribute points, which will then get divided or then get multiplied into those ratios to determine what our sub-attribute points are. So I'm just going to choose this roughly how I feel I should. So not the most sociable person, but yeah. And then if I wanted to, again, here's that information page I was talking about. We used it at the beginning to show the different species and all of their information. This is good for a first-time quiz taker because it shows exactly what each of the types of intellect could mean and types of spirit. And this is useful for knowing how much you really align with any one of those stats. Okay. So I'm just going to click finished. And there we go. All right, we got aligned with 2 in the top 10%. It looks like the Western Fernernoots people. Yeah, even I can't pronounce it properly. And then the 78% with the Drubins. I'll just go ahead and choose the one I align with most. If you wanted to, you could go back and read more about the ones you align with here. And at the end, you can too. So this is the second to last storyboard page. And then we finally reach the last one. And we get some more fun writing to read through. Just to make you feel more closely aligned with your race, and then some cool skills that you would have if potentially this turned into an actual world where it was a game you could play or a story you could follow, something like that. Here's the points page. This will give you a better idea of how alignments actually happen. Remember, we have a 30% weight here, 30% weight here, 30% weight here, and finally 10% to physicality. So again, this points page is 50% of what the alignment is based on. And then the percentages page is what the other 50% is based on. So you can see my spirit is almost perfectly aligned with what the species average looks like. And so even the points are fairly similar, but you can see there's slight differences between the percentages and the points. And so this is what I wanted to account for in my evaluation. And then finally, there is a last page where eventually I wanted to add the feature of sharing this if this ever became an app that was published on the App Store. And then we have the information of all of the races again, and we have the quiz details. So this is what any fellow programmers might be interested in reading, because it shows exactly how stats are attributed and what they mean and so on. But yeah, we already kind of went through all of that. Okay, that's about it. Kind of a fun project. Again, it was a creative project as much as it was a programming project. So I will add timestamps for the parts where I'm going through the creative stuff. That's not necessarily as important if you're just looking at this for programming information. I did remember I wanted to show quickly what quiz A does, which is the questionnaire part. Quiz A goes through and adds points based on questions. And so here I have a class that basically shows how that works. So I have a question class, and basically what Quiz A does is it goes through, it shuffles all of the questions and then asks them. And basically in here, in the constructor for the question class, you can set what the points do for each question. So here, let's look at question 1. This was the question asking about where you most naturally align with these versions of skills. And this is an intelligence-based question. Are you an analytical type of intelligence? Are you a philosophical type of intelligence? Or are you a creative type? Or some combination of those 3. And so in here, you can see this is how I've weighted those questions: 5 for answering A, 5 for answering B, and so on. If you answer C here, you could be maybe creative, but also maybe a little analytical because it says you're observant, and then empathetic as well, perhaps. And I just kind of did this based on intuition, what I thought answering the question meant. These could also be tuned to more accuracy if I spent the time on it, but this was kind of how I understood each question to be answered. But it's very versatile. That's the interesting thing, is both the stats that you get and the questions that you can put stats into, they're very versatile. You can do whatever you want with them. You can see here, I decided this question, if you answer B, is worth adding points to 5 different unique attributes. So I don't know how accurate it all is. This was all, again, all based on sort of my intuition about what the questions meant, but it's cool that you can make it so versatile. And that's what I love so much about this quiz design, this personality quiz. So that's about it. I think we've got it all covered. Thanks so much for watching.